Hi, I'm Katherine from Codology, and today I will be teaching you how to code cheat sheets using the language Markdown. Markdown is a type of markup language, so it can basically format text and other stuff on a document. Its main purpose is to be an easy and minimal code that can make stylistically interesting and readable documents, so it's great for making cheat sheets for any STEM-related notes. I'm going to be talking about a variety of applications for Markdown, so feel free to skip ahead at any part of the video. So the first thing you want to do is open up a new GitHub repository, and you can title it whatever you want. Make sure that when you open your repository that you include a README file, because that's where we're going to be doing some of our coding for Markdown. Afterwards, you want to create 3 more files. The first is coding.md, and we'll use .md just to signify that we want this to be in the Markdown language, and then after each time we create a file, we have to commit this file for GitHub to save it. The next file we're going to create is math.md, and the last one is called syntax.md. So we will now navigate to the README file, and we will change the initial header to coding cheat sheets. And under we can do links to cheat sheets. So how headers work in Markdown is that you always have some type of hashtag and a space before the code or the quote you want for the header. And there are 6 different header styles based on the number of hashtags you use. So down below I have 3 hashtags, so that would be a header 3 style. And afterwards we're just going to make a list of all the topics that we'll be covering. And we want to link these list items to actual files in our code that we created earlier. So for Markdown, what we'll do first is put all of them in square brackets. Then we'll put the link behind in parentheses. And we're just going to put the file that they navigate to. And so now if you click on all of the links, you should be able to go to all the files that you want to. So after we've created the main table of contents, we want to go back to the main page of our repository. And afterwards, we want to go to the file coding.md. And then for this, we're going to create 3 headers. The first is in the style header 3, and it'll be called coding examples. Afterwards, we'll have 2 header 5s, one called Python text coding example, and the other just called scratch example. And we'll commit those changes. So as you see, we have 3 headers now. But since in the table of contents we have an item for Python text coding example and scratch example, we want to make sure that those items navigate to that specific header. So what we'll do is right click and copy the link address for both of these headers and put them in the link for those topics to make sure that they go to those specific headers. Now let's go back to the coding.md file. And we're going to edit it again. So we're going to just create a bullet point, and we're going to call this bullet basic function syntax. And so what Markdown does is it can designate something as code if you put 3 accents or kind of backwards quotes. So they're on the top left of your keyboard, just under the escape button. So you'll put 3 before and then 3 after the block of code. And Markdown also has this feature where it can highlight code based on the coding language. So it's really helpful to see how your code just works, like in the IDE, how it looks. So we can just say that this coding language is Python because that's what we're doing. And we're going to define just like a function to just show some basic syntax for Python. And so when we commit these changes, what we'll see is that we have our basic function syntax, and then under it is a highlighted line of code. Something also pretty cool is that you can copy this code from the GitHub website. So now we're going to go back to the home page. Since Markdown cannot support Scratch for its highlighting technique, we're going to upload screenshots instead. So what we're going to do is add a file, and specifically we're going to upload it instead of creating a file. So now that we've uploaded the Scratch coding example or any other name you gave your screenshot, we're going to navigate back to coding.md. And so we can finally put the screenshot in. For images, we're going to put an exclamation mark in front of 2 square brackets. And in those square brackets, if you like, you can put some alt text. So we're going to put in our link Scratch coding example.png or whatever you named your screenshot. And so now what should happen is that your screenshot loads. But the problem is that it's kind of big for this cheat sheet. You don't want your cheat sheet to be too long. So we're going to go back and we're going to resize this image. And for that, we're going to just use pure HTML. And so we're going to type in this command. So basically you can copy it the same way as I typed it. The only thing you'll need to change is the name of your quote for the src, the width, and the height parameters. And now you have a Scratch example that's resized and fits on the page. So now we're done with all the basic Markdown coding syntax for any coding cheat sheets you might want to do. Now let's navigate to the math file where we'll do some syntax that will help with any math notation you might want to do. So the first thing we're going to look at is sub and superscript, and they're basically very useful functions for either doing stuff like variables, x1, x2, etc., or powers, so x squared, x to the third. And for subscript, it will follow immediately after any text you want to follow, and the notation is it less than and greater than sign around sub. And for the second tag, you'll also need one backslash, and that will surround the subscript. So I'll just name my subscript or variable x1. And for superscript, it's basically the same notation, except instead of sub, you have soup, and you can just put any power you want inside the superscript. So there you have it for sub and superscript. So another useful coding language that Markdown uses is LaTeX. And this is very good for any math syntax you might need. LaTeX is always surrounded by $signs. You can have either $1 or $2 surrounding it. So if you have $1, it doesn't center the piece of code, but if you have $2 it'll center it. And so I'll be using the quadratic formula for this and using some basic functionalities. So all the commands have a / before it. So we have the fraction command, and what you need to know about the fraction command is that there are two curly brackets for the numerator and the denominator. So the second command is ±, which is simply PM, and then the square root. The square root has two curly brackets followed by it, so anything that goes inside the square root is in those curly brackets. To do powers, you do carets, and specifically if you have a number that is not a single digit, you need to put curly brackets behind the caret so that the LaTeX code will recognize your full number. And so, as you see here, this is how LaTeX compiles on Markdown. So the last thing we'll have to do is just go to the syntax file, and here we'll just write some Markdown code that could be useful when writing your cheat sheets. The first thing I'll show you is some basic text options. So the first one we have is just normal text. And the second one we have is bold text. And for that, you'll put 2 asterisks on the both sides of the text that you want to bold. The next option is italics. And for that, you'll just put a underline on both sides, which is basically like a minus sign, but you shift it. For bold and italic text, you can put 3 asterisks on both sides. And if you want bold text and then to embed something with italics in the text, you'd have, again, like the bold format, 2 asterisks on both sides. And then for your italic text, you would have like the italic example we did above, just 2 underlines on each side of the text you want to italicize. And the last text type is a strike through, and you'll just be using 2 squiggly lines, which is the key under the escape key plus the shift key. And so when I commit these changes, you'll see all the different options. So the next thing we're going to do is look at indentation options. There are 2 main ones. The first is a quote, which when I commit my file, you'll see more below. And so for a quote, you just use a greater than sign. And you can do subquotes, so you'll just use more greater than signs. And the second option is a bullet option, so you can just use standard notation by using dashes, and it'll come up as bullets. You can also embed bullets by just tabbing your original bullet. So here is what the quotes look like, and underneath you can see the bullet and embedded bullet options. So now we'll just be going into some miscellaneous options. And so the first option will be tables. And you'll be needing to use the shift version of the /, just like a solid line, to create your table, and then dashes or subtraction signs. And you can just format it as I do below. So when you get here to the spot under the headers, there are 3 different alignment styles. The first one I did is just regular left aligned, the middle is center aligned, and the last one I'll be doing is right aligned. So as you can see, the placement of the colons in these lines is important for the alignment. So when I commit these changes, you can see that we have a full table and the header is above and all the options are aligned based on how we did it in the notation. Some other stuff we'll be doing is highlighting text. And this is not code, just regular text. And for that, we'll just be using 2 accent marks, and that's under the escape key. You can also create a task list. And for the task list, you'll need bullets, and after the bullets, you'll have 2 square brackets. And for that, you can either put an X in the brackets showing that your task is complete, or you can leave a space in between the brackets, meaning that the task is not finished. For line breaks, say if you want to go and kind of enter or go to the next line for text, there are 2 easy options. You can just either put 2 spaces behind the line or put a /. So there's only one more thing to do. So say if you want to use a hashtag, but you don't want it to look like a header. To do that, you'll just need a / before the hashtag, and it'll read as just a hashtag. So now you see that we have our highlighted text, our task list, our line breaks, and our hashtag without it converting to a header format for the text. Thank you so much for watching. This is the end of the tutorial. If you want some future steps or more syntax, you can always look up more examples on GitHub or just search online, and you can find LaTeX formatting online as well. Another thing to do is look more into how to use GitHub, because I just use online, but what you can do is download GitHub Desktop or use GitHub CLI, and you can work on an outside code IDE instead of doing it directly on the GitHub website.